Starting your Dungeons & Dragons adventure is a magical and fun time. Some of the most fun I've ever had playing D&D was when I very first started out, but you do have a very important question that you need to answer before you get started, and that is, what adventure are you going to be playing as you start your D&D adventure? We're gonna answer that question in this video. Now, you might be tempted to start out big and go for something like Curse of Strahd, which tons of people have talked about. It's known as one of the best Dungeons & Dragons adventures. I would advise against that. I would advise against starting out with pretty much any long, big campaign. Reason being is you don't yet know what you want, what your players want. You're still figuring out styles, and you want to start off with something that is easy to run and going to be a bit shorter. Ideally, we're looking at less than 10 sessions for the first adventure. Now, the good news is Wizards of the Coast has released 3 separate adventures specifically for starting out and learning the game. The first of these was released when 5th edition first came out, and it's called The Lost Mines of Phandelver. This is a solid starting adventure. It was a part of their starter kit. It's currently free on D&D Beyond, and so that might be the best selling point right there. But I might consider some of the other ones, because even though you might have to pay to get some of the other ones, the experience is worth it. In Lost Mines of Phandelver, you'll start out at Neverwinter. It's not really much of a setting. You move to Phandalin, which is where the adventure takes place. You pick up quests from people around town, you kill a dragon. It's a pretty fun time. I only give this adventure a B+ though, because there are a few things that I'm not a huge fan of, or I think that other ones did a much better job with. One of them, it starts out in Neverwinter and then moves to Phandalin. I don't like this because Neverwinter is a huge city. You're not going to flesh it out. You're not going to build out the city. And so it can kind of throw the feeling of D&D off a little bit when you start out in this big city that you don't really know much about, because you're meant to leave it immediately. If you run this, just start it on the road. Talk about all the stuff that happened in Neverwinter and just try to start it on the road is what I would recommend, so that you don't have that awkward time in Neverwinter. This one also uses experience, which I much prefer Milestone, which is what the other 2 adventures use. Like I said, it's B+, it's solid. I think it's a good, but I think some of the other ones are better. So, the next one that they released was their Essentials Kit, and in it, Dragons of Icespire Peak. In Dragons of Icespire Peak, a white dragon has moved into the area and pushed some of the other monsters down towards the town of Phandalin. This one either starts in Phandalin or starts on the road to Phandalin. When the players arrive, they are pretty quickly in the middle of the town center going to find a quest board, and this is how they pick up most of their quests. This one also feels cool because the players have a little bit of choice in what they're doing. The quest board will give them 3 quests that they can start out doing. Once they've completed 2 of the quests, they level up and new quests get added. This adventure, much like the previous one, takes the party from 1st level all the way up to 5th level, and it ends with trying to kill the dragon, which is pretty fun. They use milestone leveling, which I think is a plus, and I am a fan of the quest board where it gives them choices of what stuff sounds interesting that they get to do, but there are still other quests that they're given from townsfolk, so it does a really good job of adding those sorts of things and helping dungeon masters learn to incorporate that stuff into it. Another thing that it does a good job of, and letting dungeon masters learn how to handle, is the dragon moves around. At the beginning of every day, or whenever the party moves from one location to another, the Dungeon Master rolls dice behind their screen and determines where the dragon is. And so it could potentially attack the party or kind of fly by, and they might hide while it shoots some breath weapons. This adventure is usually a hit, always a lot of fun, and it just teaches some good lessons to Dungeon Masters. Another side note that this one does that I thought was interesting, and I've continued to use this since running this adventure. At one point, you fight a monster that would typically be too strong for the party to handle, but it just came out of a fight. So it's at about half health, and it's used some of its attacks or recharge attacks, so it doesn't have them available, which brings it down to a manageable level for the party to handle. Those types of things, I think, teach valuable lessons to Dungeon Masters, and it's just fun for the party to get to fight some of these bigger monsters when they're at a lower level. So overall, I give Dragons of Icespire Peak an A+. Something else that I like about it is after it's over, something to consider is if you want to go into an adventure that starts at 5th level, you can do that. This one closes out, but it also has a whole series that goes up to, I think, 15th level if you want to continue on the same story, if the players like the characters that they're playing and want to continue. The last adventure is Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. This one only came out a couple of months ago, so it is the only one that I have not had the chance to thoroughly play through with players, but I've read through it, and it looks pretty fun. This one only goes up to level 3, so from 1 to 3, which is a little bit lower than some of the other ones that go up to 5th level. With that, It's also shorter. This one's probably going to be completed in 4 to 5 sessions, and there's only one kind of hub area with, I think, 3 different locations for quests, and a couple random encounters. Some of the quests that you go on look fun. There's a wide range of monsters and stuff that you're going to get to fight while doing this, and your hub city with NPCs is the smallest of all of these starter adventures. But I don't actually hate that. I'll probably show an image of it so you can see just how small it is. But with this, you get to give a name to all of the NPCs, you get to fully flesh it out, and sometimes a smaller setting can feel bigger to the players because everything is in front of them and they get to see all these different options. Every NPC there, you have somewhat of a backstory for, you know how you're going to play them, and so I actually like a smaller setting, especially for a newer Dungeon Master. I think that that's cool. Something to note though, it is designed to be ran with basically 1 to 5 players. They don't give any guide for how to rebalance the encounters based on the number of players. So the way they handle that is they just say, if you don't have very many players, just give them sidekicks to make up the rest of it. I would advise not doing this, especially if you have new players, because it can already be overwhelming trying to learn just their character and work through their character sheet. If you double that by giving them another character, it can be a bit overwhelming. And that brings me to my next point. They also recommend using their pre-generated characters. I think they have pretty solid pre-generated characters. They kind of explain how they got there, and they give them some goals for why they're there, but you could easily let your players play something different if that's what they want to do. I wouldn't force them to play one of those pre-generated characters, though they do look pretty good, and if you have new players, they might like not having to make a character and just getting someone to play. Overall, I would give this one probably an A-, though I would not recommend playing it if you only have a couple of players, because rebalancing it could be a challenge if you're a newer Dungeon Master, and giving extra character sheets to new players could be overwhelming for them. So if you only have like 2 players, I would probably advise playing one of the other starting adventures. And actually, I'm just going to end it right there.